Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. Wars are full of unpredictable consequences. You can start a war, but you can never be certain about how it ends. Trump and Netanyahu started their war on Iran in a bid to topple the regime and to denuclearize Iran. Instead, Iran has managed to wrest control of the Strait of Hormuz. Every military strategist and think tank had predicted that Iran would shut down the Strait of Hormuz if the United States were to attack Iran for a regime change. But what no one expected is that Iran wouldn't just shut down the Strait of Hormuz, but also would set up a toll system to regulate who has access and who would be denied passage at one of the world's most crucial energy choke points. According to some estimates, if the pre-war level of tanker traffic continues through the Strait of Hormuz, Iran would end up earning almost $70 to $80 billion just from toll collections at Hormuz, which is more than the entire revenue that Iran made in a year by exporting oil. Iran's Hormuz toll also effectively neuters any sanctions that the Americans may seek to impose on Iranian oil in the future. So how has the wresting of control of the Strait of Hormuz by Iran changed the balance of power in West Asia? Our next report tells you more.
As we continue operation.
Trump and Netanyahu have managed to score some spectacular tactical victories in the Iran war. But it appears the United States and Israel have snatched a strategic defeat by giving Iran the opportunity to wrest the control of the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most important energy choke point in a war. Before the Americans and the Israelis started this war, Iran did not control the Strait of Hormuz, but now it does. And what is more, it is even collecting tolls from ships to allow them a safe passage.
Yeah, but that'll open up automatically. The answer is yes, but the Strait will open up. If we just left, the Strait's going to, otherwise they make no money. So the Strait's going to open. But what we have is no nuclear weapon, but we'll open the Strait anyway. Don't forget, we don't use the Strait. Other countries use the Strait. So we do have other countries coming up, and they'll help out, but we don't use it. It won't be easy. It won't be, I would say this, we will have that open fairly soon.
Though Donald Trump keeps insisting that the war has been won, the US Navy is nowhere near the Strait of Hormuz. Even its aircraft carriers have been pulled back from the Persian Gulf so that they are out of range of Iran's missiles and drones. Trump has been ranting about how unhelpful his NATO partners are in helping out at the Strait of Hormuz. Even Britain, which built its world empire on the back of its naval power, has shown no inclination to help out the American president at the Strait of Hormuz.
I had a discussion with President Trump last night and set out to him the views of the region here. These Gulf states are the neighbours of Iran, and therefore, if the ceasefire is to hold, and we hope it will, it has to involve them. They have very strong views on the Strait of Hormuz. And we spent most of the time on the call talking about the practical plan that's going to be needed to get navigation through the Strait, and the role that the UK is playing. For a couple of weeks now, we've been pulling together a coalition of countries, now over 30 countries, working on a political and diplomatic plan, but also looking at military capabilities.
The fact is, the Strait of Hormuz is a narrow stretch of water. Any navy that enters here with the intention of trying to force it open would effectively have entered into a kill zone. Which is why neither the American Armada nor the famed naval powers of Europe want to venture anywhere into the kill zone of Hormuz, and the stakes could not be higher. Contrary to what Trump and his allies have been claiming, that the Strait of Hormuz is shut, Iran has said that the Strait of Hormuz is open for any nation that is not at war with Iran, and Iran would facilitate a safe passage of oil tankers provided those ships pay a toll to cross the strait. According to the ship tracking data from marine traffic, this is what the scene looks like at the Strait of Hormuz at the moment. Despite the tenuous ceasefire, the number of ships crossing the Strait of Hormuz is no more than a trickle. And if the oil tanker traffic falls back to the pre-war levels and all these ships pay a toll of $1 per barrel of oil as Iran has proposed, Iran could rake in as much as $70 to $80 billion of revenue just through toll collection at the Strait of Hormuz, effectively neutering America's ability to sanction Iran. To put that number in context, Iran, by selling crude in 2025, had earned about $50 billion. By wresting control of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has effectively rewritten the balance of economic and military power in the Middle East. Despite a tenuous ceasefire that the Americans have agreed with Iran, Israel has been carrying out a wave of devastating bombings across Lebanon. And this week, Israel has unleashed more than 100 bombs in less than a span of 10 minutes in some of the most densely populated neighborhoods of the Lebanese capital, Beirut. The carnage due to the Israeli bombings has been horrific. More than 300 people have been killed, including many women and children, and almost 2,000 people have sustained some horrific injuries. Israel also gave no early warning for the civilians to evacuate from their homes, and it is civilians who paid the worst price in these Israeli bombings. Iran has said that a ceasefire for Lebanon was agreed by the Americans, but Israel insists that no ceasefire was agreed for Lebanon. Tel Aviv, in its ground incursion, has sent in its tanks in a bid to occupy the Lebanese land as far north as the Litani River. And Israel Katz has said that this occupation of the Lebanese territories will be permanent. Our next report tells you more.
Wednesday was the deadliest day in Lebanon since the renewed war between Israel and the Iranian-backed militant group Hezbollah erupted on the 2nd of March. Israel carried out the largest wave of airstrikes across Lebanon, hitting more than 100 of what it called Hezbollah command centers and military sites in 10 minutes. According to the Lebanese Health Ministry, more than 300 people were killed in Lebanon, most of them in Beirut. And the death toll is expected to rise as more remains were being pulled from the rubble and more bodies were waiting to be identified at hospitals. The Israeli assault rattled the uneasy ceasefire between Washington and Tehran, barely less than 48 hours after it had come into force. Following the strikes, the Israeli defense minister claimed that the massive operation eliminated more than 200 terrorists.
More than 200 terrorists were eliminated yesterday, bringing the number eliminated in this campaign to over 1,400.
In addition to more than 300 people killed, 1,800 people were also wounded in the widespread strikes that targeted the southern suburbs of Beirut, southern Lebanon, and the eastern Bekaa Valley. The next day, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that he had authorized direct negotiations with Lebanon as soon as possible, aimed at disarming Iranian-backed Hezbollah militants and establishing relations between the neighbors.
Following repeated approaches by the Lebanese government to open peace negotiations with us, I instructed the cabinet last night to begin direct negotiations with Lebanon. In order to achieve two objectives: first, the disarmament of Hezbollah, and second, a historic, sustainable peace agreement between Israel and Lebanon.
It is to be noted that since the renewal of hostilities last month, Israel has widened a ground invasion into Lebanon's south, ordering hundreds of thousands of Lebanese people to flee villages it views as Hezbollah strongholds. The Israeli war machine has continued its deadly march in Lebanon, more often than not in densely populated civilian areas, despite a fragile ceasefire in Iran. On Thursday, 7 people were killed in an Israeli strike on the southern Lebanese city of Tyre. The inconsolable mourners attending the funeral prayers the next day lamented the loss of defenseless civilians.
Israel's brutality does not distinguish between one civilian and another, nor between Muslim and Christian in this country. We must all stand together to confront this barbarity and this aggression.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office, as well as US President Donald Trump's press secretary Caroline Levitt, have both said that Lebanon is not part of the ceasefire deal between the US and Iran, despite the fact that a halt in Israeli attacks on Lebanon was a key point in the 10-point peace plan. Hezbollah, for its part, has not claimed any attack since the US-Iran ceasefire deal was announced. Israel and Lebanon are scheduled to hold talks in Washington in the coming days, but given decades of hostilities, Hezbollah's continued presence and long-standing disagreements over the country's shared land border, reaching an agreement will not be easy.
The Shahed-136 drone has proven itself to be a formidable weapon of choice to pierce through enemy radar systems and to wreak extensive damage to even the most sophisticated air defense systems. Russia has deployed it against Ukraine for the last 4 years, and Iran unleashed its Shahed-136 drones across the Gulf when the United States and Israel started this war of aggression on the 28th of February. The Shahed-136 drone ticks a lot of boxes. It is cheap, easy to produce, and shooting down with interceptor missiles that cost $2 million is the definition of economic irrationality. And now, Volodymyr Zelensky claims that Ukraine has built the perfect antidote, a killer drone that he claims can hunt down the Iranian Shahed-136. Volodymyr Zelensky has hopped around the Gulf capitals trying to sell this hunter drone. But how effective is it really? Our next report tells you more.
The Shahed-136 drone is devastating in its attacks. It flies slowly. It flies closer down to the ground, so the radars often miss it in its flight. It is easy to manufacture. It can be launched from the back of a pickup truck. It costs just $20,000 to manufacture. And as it has shown in the Iran war, it can devastate and blind radars worth $1 billion. It is so good that the Russians have built their own replica of it called the Geran 2. The Americans recognizing the economy this drone brings in staging attacks were forced to come up with a version of their own Shahed drone called the Lucas. But is there a cheaper way to shoot down the Shahed-136 drone without having to burn a $2 million missile interceptor? Well, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claims he has just the thing that can turn the tables on the Shahed-136. This is Ukraine's Strela. Zelensky claims this has already been tested in combat. The Strela has a top speed of about 350 kilometers per hour, a maximum altitude of 4,000 meters, and effective engagement range of up to 14 kilometers. The drone operates without GPS and is designed to resist electronic warfare jamming. And the best part of it all is that it is priced at just $2,300 per unit. And this is what Ukraine wants to sell to the Gulf nations to create a shield against the Shahed-136 attacks.
We are capable of producing at least 2,000 effective and combat-proven interceptors every day. We can produce more. It depends on investment. We need about 1,000 interceptors a day, and we can supply at least another 1,000 a day to our allies.
German weapons manufacturer Rheinmetall, however, has dismissed the Ukrainian interceptor drone as housewives' drones that are yet to prove themselves in combat. But this has drawn a sharp reaction from Zelensky.
If every housewife in Ukraine can really make drones, then every housewife in Ukraine can be the CEO of Rheinmetall. I congratulate Ukraine on the exceptionally high level of its defense manufacturing sector.
But the Japanese defense firms appear to be on board with the Ukrainians and have partnered with the Ukrainian drone interceptor firms to mass produce the drone hunters.
Shooting missiles down with missiles might be just fine, but shooting a Shahed that costs 5 million yen with a missile that costs several hundred million yen, that kind of economic irrationality just isn't feasible anymore, and people are starting to realize that. So demand is extremely high, but among that, with the conflict in the Middle East happening now, and then in areas near Russia, like Poland and Europe, those areas are seeing particularly strong attention, or rather, strong interest in this technology.
The business model of war is changing. America's highly sophisticated and precise missiles have proven themselves to be inadequate when an adversary floods the airspace with cheap and deadly drones. So the question now is, can the Ukrainian drone hunters turn the tables on Iran's Shahed-136 drones?
On the 5th of April, gunmen stormed a Baptist church during Easter Sunday service in northwest Nigeria, killing 5 worshippers and abducted as many as about 35 others in a brazen daylight attack that has left a rural community shattered in the Kaduna state. Later the same day, the Nigerian military claimed to have rescued about 31 worshippers who were abducted during the service. The attack has once again underscored the worsening insecurity in the region that is plagued by criminal gangs and militant groups who have intensified their raids and kidnappings. Our next report tells you more.
In northwest and central Nigeria, armed gangs, locally infamous as bandits, have for years preyed on rural communities. Raiding villages, kidnapping residents for ransom, and burning homes after looting them is their modus operandi. Early on Sunday, as Pastor Sunday Gajare was reading the Bible to his congregation, the armed bandits arrived on motorcycles and unleashed mayhem in a Rico village of the Kaduna state.
We are in the church around that 8 o'clock in the morning. We are doing service. I'm a pastor of a Baptist church. When I am reading the Bible, then I see somebody come outside and stand near our church, like he want to enter. After that, I try to know who is that person. Before I began to think, 2 minutes, I hear a voice outside say, bandits. I will hear bandits, everybody began to run. As we are running, we now pass 2 minutes, again, we see them with motorcycle, plenty of them. So they began to follow people, began to kill people. And before 20 minutes, they do operation and they kill about 5 people. And they also carry about 35 people go with them. So we follow them, we now see where they enter with our people.
For an inconsolable Timothy Waziri, whose father was among the worshippers killed, the attack has compounded an already devastating loss. Last December, Timothy's elder brother was killed by bandits while farming during harvest season.
I feel so sad. I feel shattered. I feel completely destroyed. My elder brother last year, December, was killed by the same bandit when he went to farm during the harvest period. And now he's not up to a year and 6 months. Our father is equally killed. So the entire family is shambled. We feel so destroyed and we feel so dejected.
The Easter Sunday attack, once again, brought into focus persistent insecurity across northwest Nigeria, where bandits have terrorized rural communities for years with mass kidnappings for ransom and deadly village raids. It is to be noted that the Easter Sunday attack occurred despite the police chief ordering a massive security deployment, including at places of worship during the Easter festival. On the same day, in a separate incident, Nigeria's military killed 65 bandits in Zamfara state in what has been described as a major breakthrough. In an overnight attack on Wednesday, unidentified jihadists overran a military base near Benishaik in northeast Nigeria, reportedly killing 18 soldiers, including a brigadier general, and setting ablaze vehicles and shops in the area. Since Boko Haram's 2009 uprising, Africa's most populous country has been fighting a jihadist insurgency for 17 years. On Wednesday, despite an expanding security partnership between Washington and Abuja, citing risks such as terrorism, civil unrest, and kidnapping, the United States urged its citizens to reconsider traveling to Nigeria. Last November, the American President Donald Trump had redesignated Nigeria as a country of particular concern, saying Christians were being targeted and authorities were failing to protect them, a claim denied by the Nigerian government. Given the recent wave of violence and the subsequent US directive, the Nigerian government has its task cut out and the security situation needs to be addressed rather urgently.
On the 9th of April, as many as about 2,000 protesters, including union members, workers and students, took to the streets of Venezuelan capital Caracas and marched towards the presidential palace. The protesters are demanding for higher wages and dignified pensions, but they've met by police blockades. Soon afterwards, clashes between the protesters and the Venezuelan riot police erupted, where the police resorted to firing tear gas in a bid to disperse the protesters. Noteworthy is the fact that this is one of the first intense protests that the country has witnessed ever since the United States abducted Nicolas Maduro. Our next report tells you more.
The oil-rich but economically troubled Latin American nation of Venezuela witnessed one of its most intense protests over salary and pension hikes on Thursday. Close to 2,000 union leaders, retirees and public sector workers chanting "Yes, we can" marched towards the Miraflores presidential palace in downtown Caracas, only to be encountered with blockades set up by the riot police.
The people can't stand it anymore. This is a peaceful march. We're going to Miraflores to tell those governing this country that enough is enough. Please, we want a decent salary. The people, retirees, people receiving pensions, all the people can't stand it anymore, this scarcity and poverty. Dear comrades, $0.27 don't even go far enough to buy a candy.
According to the advocacy group Foro Penal, relatives of prisoners demanding the release of the more than 500 still imprisoned also took part in the rally. As the protesters made their way through central Caracas, Venezuelan riot police deployed since morning with helmets and shields stood lining the streets. Once the demonstrators drew within a few blocks of the presidential palace, the riot police fired tear gas in a bid to disperse protesters.
They're attacking us, they're hitting us, but we will go after this dictatorship because today it's over. They've hurt us with their shields, ladies and gentlemen, and the elderly people. Police are hurting us with shields, but we will not give up. We're here for life. We will give our lives here.
The clashes with riot police are indicative of the growing anger and frustration in Venezuela over the perceived failure of acting President Delcy Rodriguez, who replaced socialist hardliner Nicolas Maduro in January to address a cost of living crisis. A day prior to the protests, Delcy Rodriguez had announced a responsible increase in wages on May 1st, but did not disclose the amount.
All workers and guilds go to Miraflores to demand Delcy Rodriguez, who said would increase salaries responsibly. The only irresponsible here is you. You're the great irresponsible who take from workers all their profits.
It is to be noted that since March 2022, Venezuela's minimum monthly wage has been set at 130 bolivars, equivalent to just a few cents, although many public employees earn more through bonuses and other payments. That can raise their monthly income to about $150. Complaining about the abysmally low monthly wages, roughly 330 times lower than the UN poverty line of $3 a day. Unions and workers have labeled them as starvation wages. If the recent protests are a sign of things to come, the Venezuelan society, long gripped by fear, seems to have rediscovered its voice and is pressing hard for the long-standing demands to increase wages.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. If you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.